Hello and a very good morning. It's 7 o'clock. This is Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
And I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how we're looking.
Keir Starmer to call for a more European NATO and reduce the alliance's dependence on the United States.
Peter Mandelson has been asked to testify before Congress about his relationship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein. Also ahead this morning, we'll be going through some of the morning's newspapers in our news review. That's with Ryan Saby and Shona Craven.
That's coming up. And finally, a gold medal for Team GB at the Winter Olympics. Matt Weston slides to victory in the men's singles skeleton.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for being with us. It is a big day in Munich, where world leaders will gather to discuss global security.
Keir Starmer is amongst them and is due to speak at around 9 o'clock this morning and will reportedly call on Europe to end its over-reliance on the United States.
Well, it's a timely message given that the US Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, sent a deputy to a NATO meeting earlier this week, and the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, skipped a key meeting on Ukraine yesterday due to what was described as a scheduling issue.
So can Sir Keir convince Europe to work together? Our political correspondent Nick Martin has more.
Well, we're expecting quite a broad-ranging speech from the Prime Minister when he addresses the Munich Security Conference. Yes, it will be about defence, but just seeing the preview to it, it will be more about a repositioning of geopolitics. He will say that Europe needs to stand on its own 2 feet when it comes to defence, that it can't just rely on the might of the United States. Although that's not to say that we expect him to sort of turn their back on the United States. In his speech, we think he will say that the United States is indispensable, but that they can no longer rely on them as a sort of backup power. Now, this has kind of been the tone that we've been hearing from European leaders for some time now, probably more than a year, ever since Donald Trump said, look, you can't expect us to always be coming through with all the support and munitions and military might. Europe has to do it on its own. And more importantly, Europe has to increase its defence spending. There are roughly about 3 or 4 strands to what we're expecting the Prime Minister to talk about. Interestingly, he'll be distancing himself from the sort of Brexit stigma, as he might call it. He says, we are not the Britain of Brexit years anymore. And that's a signal, an attempt to kind of reset the security relationship, to try and bring the United States closer to Europe. He'll also talk about industry, the creation of jobs, and he'll also talk about the importance of European nations working together. This is as much a message to the United States to say, we have heard you loud and clear. Europe is stepping up to do things like defending critical borders and also to try and help defend Ukraine from that Russian invasion. So the Prime Minister's speech today, not solely about core defence, but a kind of message to European leaders and, of course, to the United States that Europe is ready to put its money where its mouth is when it comes to defence.
As Nick Martin reporting there now, a new study hoping to revolutionise the way mental health conditions are diagnosed and treated is about to be carried out.
Yeah, 49,000 people are expected to take part in this study, which has been backed by 10 NHS trusts. So let's find out more. Emma is back with us. Hi, Emma. It sounds like a really big study. So talk us through what the ultimate aim is of this.
So the ultimate aim is to be able to provide personalised treatments for people with these severe mental health illnesses in the same way as personalised treatments are being made available now for people with certain cancers and other rare diseases. So we're talking about conditions like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder and severe depression. And actually, to give you an idea of the scale, over 500,000 people in England alone have those conditions. So the idea is it transforms the understanding of those illnesses, also the diagnosis. So what's going to happen is a service called NHS DigiTrials will find who's eligible, contact them. They'll be sent a home sampling kit, and we'll do either a saliva or blood sample. So that provides the genetic material. Then there's the medical records that feed in, and also a detailed questionnaire that will give a real sense of what their lived experience is for these people. So ultimately what they've got is the ability to link genes, background, biology and mental health. So 49,000 people will be taking part. They've already got 2,000 so far from England and Wales so far, but actually in the end it will be an international study. And for those who maybe would struggle with this, because of course if you've got severe mental health issues, it might just be a step too far to be filling these things in and doing these samples, the NHS will provide support also for people who maybe struggle with accessing technology or don't feel comfortable using that. So that support will be there. And the hope is that it really will make some breakthroughs when it comes to mental health. So if you're approached to take part, the study leaders are really urging people to consider it. And then there's the incentive too of a £50 voucher.
It's not too bad at all. And I suppose the idea that we hear from the health sector is about preventative care as well, because the impact of mental health, not only on the individuals as well, but also on sort of the wider community, is huge, and on the NHS.
It is. And, you know, you've got to think about the day-to-day impact for people with these severe mental health illnesses, and also the family and friends who are the support network. That is immense. But also physical health. People are often quite surprised to hear that someone with these severe mental health problems likely to have a reduced lifespan by as much as 20 years. And so if you're working out what's going on with someone's mental health, you're able to target the care there, then in theory, hopefully, you can then reduce these preventable physical problems. For these people with severe mental illnesses, 2 out of 3 will die from a preventable physical illness. So it gives you an idea of the scale. So there's so much at stake here. So 49,000 people taking part.
Yeah, sounds like a really important study. Yeah, Emma, thanks very much.
Appreciate you. Okay.
Now, to the Jeffrey Epstein scandal now, and Peter Mandelson has been urged to answer questions as part of a US Congress investigation into the convicted paedophile. 2
members of the Congressional Oversight Committee have written to the former UK ambassador to the US requesting that he appear before them. Our US correspondent, David Blevins, says this.
Lord Mandelson is not compelled to come here to Washington and answer questions. He would have to do so of his own volition. Congressional subpoenas are only legally enforceable when they apply to American citizens. And this is not a subpoena yet. It's just a letter from 2 Democratic members of the committee investigating Epstein, asking Lord Mandelson to come here and answer their questions. They talk about the number of references to and images of him in the Epstein files. Now, Peter Mandelson has questioned the authenticity of the documents, says he has no record or recollection of receiving sums of money from Epstein, and that he regrets ever having a friendship with him. But given that what's been revealed so far has cost him his job as UK ambassador to the United States, has cost him his seat in the Lords, and has cost him his membership of the Labour Party, you've got to wonder how long he can avoid these questions, and indeed how long Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, can avoid these questions, because there is no acknowledgement of royal protocol on this side of the Atlantic. One member of Congress says this could bring down the monarchy. And if you think it's impossible that a former prince would appear on Capitol Hill to answer questions, remember that in 2 weeks' time, a former president, Bill Clinton, will appear before this committee to answer questions, the first former president to do so in nearly 50 years.
Well, at the centre of all of this, of course, the young women and girls who suffered abuse at the hands of Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, our data and forensics team has been going through thousands of documents and video, unearthing detail from some of the survivors. Here's an excerpt from one report, voiced by an actor, and warning this clip contains distressing content.
J.E. loved massages. Other women would provide... Women would remove top. I'd have to rub feet, and he have me witness sexual contact. Similar people, women, girls, had professional massage therapists. Other girls around looked like models, like 100 times he had me in the room when massaged. LA stay. A lot of girls around. One girl freaked out and cried. I gave her a hug. She said, "I don't want to do this. I have a boyfriend." Me and another girl said, "Don't worry about it. Leave, or stay out here." JE made me stand in my underwear, took pics to show me I looked fat. Personal trainer, if want to be a model, gotta lose weight. Didn't think so many girls involved until his arrest in 2008. Thought I was the only one. Not in my own experience did I see other girls have encounters with friends of JE. It would not surprise me. Always instructed, never asked, instructed to have encounters with other females. VR, remember her being there. I think she was on a flight here and then I went to Florida. Not sure. She was younger than me. I was aging out. I remember seeing him arrested on TV 07, 08, then hearing he got that house arrest thing. Several lawyers, victims contact told me my name brought up to JE and he said, "Oh, she's grateful for everything I've done for her. She won't talk."
And if you've been affected by that report, you can call 116 123 or email joe@samaritans.org.
Now, the US military has said it's moving a second aircraft carrier into the Middle East as tensions continue to build with Iran.
The US President, Donald Trump, declared that a change in power in the country would be the best thing that could happen as his administration considers military action against Tehran.
Well, it comes as there is a global day of protests planned, with tens of thousands of Iranians in Europe expected to call for the regime to go. Let's speak now to the British Iranian investigative reporter, Sahar Sand. We're pleased to say here with us. Good morning to you, Sahar. Thank you very much for coming in. So, look, as we said there, expected there's going to be a global day of protests. It's quite a while since Trump said help was on the way. What's the situation for Iranians right now?
I mean, Trump has really left many Iranians in a bit of a situation. I mean, Iranians didn't go out on the streets to protest because Trump said. These protests, these series of movements of people not wanting the regime have been going on for a long time. But of course, they were emboldened when Trump initially said to the Islamic Republic, if you kill a single protester, we'll attack. Over 30,000 or more killed later, he didn't. Then in the middle of the massacre, Trump said, if you execute a single person, we'll attack. We know that. I was looking at reports yesterday. Around 400, just over 400, 417 people have been executed in 2026 alone. So Iran is breaking its own records. And Trump has now moved into these negotiations about the nuclear deal. And he gave Iran a set of demands. And in those demands, I mean, we don't really know exactly what they're talking about, but the demands that were made public, there wasn't really a clear mention of the executions, of the crackdown. So Iranians feel extremely, extremely let down. But the reason they went out on the streets in the first place is still very much there. And they now have even more anger than before. I mean, every time there is a movement in Iran, we're like, it can't get any worse, and it keeps getting worse, and it only makes people more angry, more adamant to get rid of this regime. So people are now going out in the diaspora to protest, to show their support to Iranians, because I know from every single person I talk to in Iran, it really matters to them that the world is watching, that the world doesn't forget what happened, because that will in turn affect the decisions made by politicians.
Yeah, so understandably, people in Iran want everyone to keep their attention on what's going on there. But what do they want in terms of a deal between Trump and the Iranian regime. And as you say, it's focusing on nuclear, it's focusing on missile capability as well. But do they want a deal to be struck? Because it could mean that some sanctions are pulled back, or will they feel... But the regime stays in place. So what's the wish there?
That is such a critical and key question. Most people say, do not negotiate with the Islamic Republic's government, with the regime, because they say a regime that massacred its own people for demanding for their rights, a regime that carried out what many human rights activists are now calling a genocide against its own people. They say this regime doesn't represent us. Do not negotiate with them. They do not represent our rights. They do not represent our country. And by entering these negotiations, you're legitimizing this regime. And many Iranians have been living with these sanctions, living with these financial problems, because, I mean, their problem wasn't fundamentally financial reasons when these protests began, even though that's been reported, that's how it was reported in the West originally. Their demands are very clear. They want a normal life, a free life, a democratic life, which they do not have. They want a life where they can travel freely, where women and men have the same rights. It's so basic that they're lacking. And they fear that by even entering these negotiations, Iranian regime is being legitimized, and all of these killings, all of these massacres is just being overlooked. I'm going to give an example that I heard an Iranian friend of mine in Iran says. He said, if you knew someone who has killed their own children, who's beaten their own children in the worst way, raped them, killed them, will you sit down and have dinner with them? Will you do business with them? No. You actually take action to take those children away, because what's happening in Iran is no longer an internal issue. They have broken the international human rights, and we know that the IRGC has been nurturing terrorism on the streets of this country. We know that they have carried out terror attacks here in Europe, in the US. So what the Iranian people inside of Iran are essentially fighting for is for our safety and security on our streets as well. So by entering these negotiations, not only are we undermining their rights, what they have fought for, but our own national security as well.
OK. Zohar Sand, we really appreciate you coming in today. Thank you very much for being with us. We'll speak again real soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stay with us. Coming up, as Keir Starmer prepares to address the security conference in Munich, we're going to be speaking to the Defence Minister, Luke Pollard.
There's a fresh look to your news from 10 on Sky News.
It's a new show called The Wrap, every night of the week.
We'll still bring you the day's biggest stories,
but with more lively debate,
more in-depth commentary,
and more of what you need to know.
Plus a look at what's making tomorrow's headlines.
The Wrap.
Everything wrapped up for you from 10 on Sky News.
Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. President, what will you say next to Benjamin Netanyahu? In June 2009, did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent. I've interviewed some of America's most recognisable politicians. Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK.
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting.
Mr Walker, you're anti-abortion, but 2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir?
Connor, what did you say to the president? What did you say?
We had a great meeting. He was a great man.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents based in Washington, D.C. David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that?
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here.
Why only in America? Why is this American exceptionalism? I just want to understand why you do not think that guns are the problem.
Why is this just an American problem?
The anger too, and the division.
Where are you from? From Sky News, UK.
Yeah.
Back up.
Mr. Navarro, can
I'm allowed to ask questions, aren't I?
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding, Mr. Musk. Has your ego and ignorance cost Ukrainian lives?
David Cameron needs to worry about his own country, and frankly, he can kiss my ass.
Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody?
Free wherever you get your news.
What words do you have for Harry Dunn's family today?
Have a nice day.
Do you fear a fourth indictment?
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
I'm going to take you behind the scenes here for Election Night Live. They have gone up and up.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Ed Conway, Sky News, is anyone going to talk to us?
Mortgage rates did go up very sharply during your time in office.
Here it is.
First off, just the scale of what we're looking at.
Our data shows it's been happening. Question is, why it hasn't been stopped.
Now, an illegal dump in Essex is just one of hundreds that have sprung up all across the country, but this one has been described as one of the worst so far, and it could have a disastrous impact on the environment.
Well, 2 men have been arrested in connection with it, and Sky News understands the Environment Agency is taking legal action. Dan Whitehead reports.
Hidden in plain sight, this is the latest huge illegal waste dump. A mass of tens of thousands of tonnes of rubbish sitting right beside the M25 southeast of Epping. Sky News has learnt that it was being dumped on just 7 days ago. Photographed by a local resident last Friday, he then called 999.
Coming home from my small holding, I saw a lorry stuck in the mud.
Just here?
Massive lorry, 40 foot long. I thought the guy was in trouble, so I thought I'd try to help. Went to the cab, nobody in the cab. So I went round the back and I saw rubbish spewing out the back of the cab. I went to the back of the site, there's a massive digger there, and I saw an enormous hole. So I assumed they were going to put the rubbish in the hole. So that alerted me to think, this is not normal fly tipping. So I came back out, I phoned 999.
2 men, a 55-year-old from Surrey and a 25-year-old from County Armagh in Northern Ireland, were arrested by Essex police within an hour. Satellite imagery shows the site in October 2024 green and full of trees. But just 5 months ago, on the 19th of September, there appears to be activity on the site. Now it is a vast wasteland.
This place is unbelievable. Even in this wet, cold weather, the stench is accurate. It is choking. And what's here is remarkable. It's not just thousands of tons of processed building material. There's loads of personal stuff. There's bank statements, kids' school books. There's even some pending immigration documents. And what is buried deep all across here goes back hundreds and hundreds of metres.
At the very back, the waste spills down into a tributary that feeds the River Roding and ultimately the Thames.
It's absolutely heartbreaking to see the sheer scale of this illegal waste dump.
It is a major concern for environmentalists.
You have situations where the Environment Agency is threatening to prosecute local river guardians for doing river restoration without permission, but completely failing to deal with massive organised waste crime on this scale. To me, it shows the failure of the Environment Agency, and if they don't sort themselves out soon and actually deal with these kinds of problems, they should be abolished and a body put in place who can actually get a handle on this problem.
Sky News understands the Environment Agency is urgently seeking a court order to close the site down and says it shares the public's anger. But its investigation has been going on for a year, and many will question just how this has happened yet again. This is one of hundreds of illegal waste sites across the country, with authorities struggling to tackle a growing network of organised criminals behind them. Dan Whitehead, Sky News, near Epping in Essex.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah, terrible. And I think we're probably all familiar with seeing sites like that we perhaps drive past and don't think too much about. And certainly it's never occurred to me that there's a sort of organised crime behind it, that there are people who are picking up waste, for a fee and just dumping it somewhere and making good money out of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a growing problem as well.
It definitely is. And as Dan mentioned in the reporting, the Environment Agency are investigating it. It seems as if there's nothing that they can actually do to kind of enforce this and stop it happening, despite that one being there for quite a while, and as you say, others being popping up all over the country.
Yeah, and it's an extraordinary statistic, that, isn't it? That a fifth of all waste in England is being illegally managed. It's extraordinary.
Not good. All right.
Weather?
Should we do it?
Yeah.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, there'll be some wintry hazards this weekend, but today is going to bring some sunshine at last before the wet weather then starts to move. It's a cold start when I got up this morning, just about gone 3 o'clock. Now, there's a widespread frost now, which will be sharp in places, with some icy stretches, bringing some difficult travelling conditions on those surfaces that will remain untreated. You can see the temperatures there in the minus figures in the centre of the country. There'll be almost unbroken sunshine, though, this morning. The island will see cloud increasing. Most places look dry, but exposed coast will have a few wintry showers. Northern Scotland and Eastern England look most at risk. It will be cold. It shouldn't feel too bad if you find the sunshine, because the wind will be light.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
All right, we'll be back in a couple of minutes' time. We'll continue our coverage from the Munich Security Conference, and also James will be here with all the weekend sport, including that gold medal from Matt Weston in the skeleton bob.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News presenter?
We've done the work and the reading, so you don't have to.
Being a Sky News presenter.
Hello and welcome. Westminster, the heart of British politics.
I'm so sorry about what happened to you.
So what on earth is going on?
It's not true.
Can I tell you what I think? It's really unusual. Mornings with Richard and Frost.
Let's crack on. Let's get started.
Well, we've been looking ahead to the Munich Security Conference. The Prime Minister due to speak at 9 p.m. and he's going to talk about... 9 a.m. Thank you very much for that. My clock is wrong. And he's going to talk about making sure that Europe is reliant upon itself, and less so on the United States. Let's get the views now with Luke Pollard, Minister of State for Defence, Readiness and Industry. Luke Pollard, thanks very much for being with us at 7:30 a.m. We do appreciate you joining us. Look, so we've heard from some of the Americans for the past couple of days. I mean, they're skipping meetings, they're sending deputies. Is this a sign that America is withdrawing its support for Europe?
I think the US has been quite clear that they're focusing their attention on the Indo-Pacific. And that's why the Prime Minister will say today that we need to reduce our over-dependence on the United States for European security, and we need to increase our focus on European NATO. That means the UK doing more with Europe and Europe doing more with the UK, because Europe's security relies on Britain and Britain relies on Europe for our security as well. It's a big departure from the language that we've seen from the Brexit years that the Prime Minister will use, because we can see the new era of threat that we are in. We can see the threats that Russia is making, not just in their illegal invasion in Ukraine, but in their activities against our undersea cables, in the cyber attacks that the UK is facing on a continuous basis. That's why we're stepping up defence spending, and that's why the Prime Minister today will talk about how the UK needs to be closer with the European Union on defence and security issues to keep ourselves safe and deter aggression from Russia.
Yeah, you talk about a new era of threat. Is it also a new era of uncertainty about our reliance on our previously most reliable partner, the United States?
The US remains our key security partner. It is a deep relationship that we have with them, not just on defence, security and intelligence. But what the Prime Minister is setting out today is that as a continent, Europe needs to do more, not just to rely on the US, but to build our own capabilities as well. He'll set out that the work we must do as a nation is to build a common industrial base with our European friends. That means building on the jobs that we already have. British firms account for a quarter of the European industrial base. But as a continent, we have 10 main battle tanks. We have 10 fighter jet types, where the US in many cases only has one that they can focus on. So it's an opportunity for us to create good, well-paid, decent jobs, with defence being an engine for growth, but increase our lethality, and that means increasing our deterrence to stop Russia looking at NATO, especially European NATO, and thinking they might have a pop.
Yeah, look, I take all of that, but you're not going to try and tell us this isn't because the US has become unreliable that we've had to do this. It's necessary that we're doing this anyway. But part of this is because we can't trust what's going on in Washington, right?
No, I wouldn't put it in that framing. The US has been very clear in their latest national security documents that they want to focus on the Indo-Pacific, where they see rising threats to their own security. This is, to be fair, something that US presidents have been telling European nations now for many decades. It's just that the security situation today is so profound, is so clear in front of us, that we now need to respond with much greater cooperation between European NATO members than we have seen in the past. Now, we'll still rely on the United States for certain capabilities, but we need to step up. And that's what the Prime Minister will be saying to NATO allies at the Munich Security Forum. He'll be saying we need to cooperate more closely together. The Brexit years are over in terms of the language and the tone that Britain and Europe had between each other, because our collective security matters more at the moment. And we know that European security relies on Britain and vice versa. So that is precisely why we need to do more with our European friends while maintaining our deep relationship with the United States on security and defence matters.
Luke Pollard, it's Anna here. I just wonder if I can ask you about your reaction to news that we had yesterday. The High Court ruled that the government's prescription of Palestine action was disproportionate and unlawful. Pretty humiliating for the government, wasn't it?
Well, the High Court found in their judgment that Palestine Action had committed acts of terrorism, that they had celebrated and supported those people who had committed those acts. So that's clearly disappointing. The Home Secretary has been clear that she'll be fighting that decision at the Court of Appeal. But I think it's important at this time that people are legitimately allowed to voice their concerns around what's happening in Gaza, but they can do so in a way that does not support the terrorist actions that we've seen from Palestine Action. Now, I've got strong views about what's happening in Gaza, as I know the people that I represent do as a member of Parliament. It's right that people can peacefully protest, can take those views onto the street, can be determined and loud about them. But when that steps over a line into those terrorist actions that we saw, attacking RAF jets, attacking police officers, that steps over a line that is unacceptable. Now, that would be the case if it was for Palestine Action or for any other group, because prescription doesn't look at the politics, it looks at the actions. And where we found that through a robust evidence-based process, we found those actions to be crossing the line, deeply concerning, and that's why prescription was implemented, and that's why we'll be fighting it at the Court of Appeal.
The High Court, though, said that most of Palestine Action's activities had not reached the level, scale and persistence to be defined as terrorism. And we've seen a huge number of people arrested, haven't we? I think more than 2,500 people, some for direct action, but many for simply holding up placards. I mean, have you felt comfortable about that?
Well, in just reading out the quote that you have done there, it will be clear that some of their actions do pass a threshold, and that is what the government needs to look at through any organisation. I want people to be able to protest and voice their concerns freely in a democracy. It's the hallmark of British democracies. But where those actions of Palestine Action have crossed a line, it's right that as a government we take steps to protect our national security and those of our fellow citizens. That's what we have done. So protesting peacefully about Gaza and about issues of concern absolutely is a fundamental right that we protect in this country. But when that steps over a line to undertaking terrorist acts, as the High Court themselves have admitted Palestine Action have done, that's not acceptable. And that's why the Home Secretary has said we will be appealing the decision that has been made, and will continue to make the case that democracy and protest are important, but violence is unacceptable.
OK, and finally, I just want to ask you about Peter Mandelson, because he's been asked to testify to the US Congress over his relationship with the paedophile financier Jeffrey Epstein. Would you like to see him go and do that?
I think anyone that is invited to give evidence to provide clarity on what that vile man did, I think is absolutely right that he does so. We're cooperating fully with investigations, and that's the right thing to do, because at the heart of this scandal are victims that deserve the truth and they deserve justice. Now, if we can contribute to that, and if Peter Mandelson can provide evidence to help support those investigations, to provide the truth that those victims need, he should do so.
Well, Luke Pollard, we appreciate your time this morning, and thanks very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Thanks, Luke. James has joined us. What have you got for us, James?
Lots in the sports, but we're going to start with some good news for Team GB. And that news is that they've won their first medal of the Winter Olympics in Milan. Cortina, Matt Weston winning gold in the men's skeleton. Weston has led the competition from the start, breaking the track record twice in Thursday's first two heats and again in the penultimate heat on Friday night. The victory is Britain's first gold medal for an individual male event since Robin Cousins in figure skating in 1980. And Matt Weston remains the UK's most decorated slider at World Championship level and now holds the title of Olympic champion. Yeah, that was the family's reaction last night when Matt won the gold medal, and he gave his own reaction following his historic victory.
the reason why I've got a Premiership medal.
There was a lot of noise around Alan possibly going to Manchester United and then Newcastle.
If you're asking me would I like Alan Shearer here, of course, who wouldn't like Alan Shearer?
Doesn't bother me at all. That's all it is, talk.
There are only 2 clubs that interested Alan.
I spoke to Sir Alex Ferguson. The temptation to go to Man United was huge.
You name your price, you've got to be prepared to stick to it.
How much was it? Because that was a world record.
It's £15 million, making it virtually impossible for me to leave.
I think there was an inevitability that he would move at some stage.
Sheffield United! How are the lads?
We're breaking records. We're giving people hope again.
Be like 7.25 for his name and number.
I just had to come back home. It was my dream to play for Newcastle and score goals at the Gallagher. A lot of people probably looked at us and thought we probably needed a couple of centre-halves. Not Keegan.
After all, I'm only a sheet metal worker's son from Newcastle.
If I had to make the same decision again, it would be signed for Newcastle all day long.
Blackburn Rovers are finally back in the big time. Jack Walker's millions and the managerial expertise of Kenny Dalglish are proving a potent combination at Ewood Park these days.
I knew what was happening up there at Blackburn. They were continually spending money. We was building to be successful. Jack Walker just had one idea, which was, this is my hometown club. I'm not interested in too much on the commercial side. I just want them to be a success.
Shearer, he scored on his debut! Alan Shearer, Britain's most expensive footballer, starts to repay the fee with that cracking volley.
Made it hard for myself, haven't I? People are going to expect great things off me now.
Being the most expensive footballer in the Premier League, how important was it for you within your own mind to get off to a good start and start banging in a few goals?
Blackburn Rovers and Southampton Football Club have put that price tag on me. People keep saying to me I'm the most expensive. All right, I am, but I've got nothing to do with that price tag. I can only go out and play to the best of my ability, and if clubs want to pay that amount of money for me, then so be it.
It was Kenny and Ray, obviously, who had decided that they would like to buy him. Ray had him with the England under-21s. He knew what talent was there. And it was at their instigation, really.
The atmosphere completely changed. We'd started signing more expensive players, and it were just little old Blackburn that were doing it. As the weeks went on, more and more arrived. We were getting the most expensive man in football, and Jack Walker brought him to us.
What an effort and what a goal from Alan Shearer! Oh, what a story!
He was sort of the old-fashioned centre-forward, really. He'd head the ball, he'd use his elbows, he'd shoot, he'd run into space behind the back four for fun. It was just everything that you would want.
Alan will tell you himself, he's the worst trainer in pre-season. Always at the back when they were running. We thought, what have they signed here? This kid can't move. All of a sudden, we got the balls out and no one could catch him.
Alan Shearer scores for Blackburn Rovers!
I had 4 incredible years at Blackburn. I mean, they were just amazing. From that very first meeting that I had with Kenny, Ray Harford, Robert Corr and Jack Walker, it's so clear to me, I can still remember it now. They said to me, we want to win the Premier League and we think we can do it within 4 years.
When he first came there, he was running into them channels, he was bullying centre-backs, scored different types of goals, long range, free kicks, headers. He was just an incredible player, and in the dressing room he was fantastic.
Still in play, and Shearer's in there, it's a goal! Alan Shearer's done it for Blackburn Rovers!
Well, he's come for Alan Shearer, goal for Blackburn Rovers! Blackburn Rovers are the champions!
Little old Blackburn to come into the Premier League and take on the might of Man United and beat them to the Premier League was something that was so special.
I can't speak highly enough of him. He's the reason why I've got a Premiership medal.
Whatever anybody says, it's a team game. He was the most important player. His goals were phenomenal. He didn't miss. He's absolutely ruthless, and you know, when any sort of opportunity arose, you knew it was going to hit the back of the net.
We had a talisman up front, didn't we? I mean, everybody knew that. Kenny and Ray developed a system to help play to that.
I always knew that Alan wanted to be that out-and-out number 9, but I was fine with that in terms of the way that I played at Norwich. I was always a sort of focal point as a striker, and always played better with somebody making runs off me.
Chris knew what I wanted, I knew what he wanted, and we understood each other's game really, really well. He played a huge part in our success, and it was just that the best partnerships are the ones you don't have to work at. Me and Chris just clicked straight away.
He'd won the Premier League with Blackburn, and in respect,
Well, thank you for that, James. I've said it once, I'll say it again. I might say it a few more times. Looking forward to Lewis Hamilton this season. Looks like he has a fast car.
He looked pretty happy in it.
He really did, didn't he? He really did.
Now.
Let's hope, let's hope.
Let's see. We've got another look at the papers coming up for you in a moment. We're joined this morning by Ryan Sabey, Deputy Political Editor of The Sun, and Shona Craven, columnist for The National. That's coming up next.
There's a fresh look to your news from 10 on Sky News.
It's a new show called The Wrap, every night of the week.
We'll still bring you the day's biggest stories,
but with more lively debate,
more in-depth commentary,
and more of what you need to know.
Plus a look at what's making tomorrow's headlines.
The Wrap.
Everything wrapped up for you from 10 on Sky News.
Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
I'm James Matthews, and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Mr. President, what will you say next to Benjamin Netanyahu? In June 2009, did you stay at the apartment in Manhattan of Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm not answering any questions about him.
I'm Martha Kellner, and I'm Sky's US correspondent. I've interviewed some of America's most recognisable politicians.
Should the Defence Secretary and the Vice...
Wait, what country are you
from? The UK?
Okay, we don't give a crap about your opinion and your reporting.
Mr. Walker, you're anti-abortion, but 2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir?
Connor, what did you say to the President? What did you say?
We had a great meeting with him. He's a great man.
I'm David Blevins, one of Sky's US correspondents, based in Washington, D.C. David Blevins from Sky News. Fire chiefs say that they're really stretched to the limit and running out of water. What have you got to say to that?
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here.
Why only in America? Why is this American exceptionalism? I just want to understand why you do not think that guns are the problem.
Why is this just an American problem?
The anger too, and the division.
Where are you from? From Sky News, UK.
Yeah.
Back up.
Mr. Navarro,
I'm allowed to ask questions, aren't I?
I'm Mark Stone, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding, Mr. Musk. Has your ego and ignorance, sir, cost Ukrainian lives?
David Cameron needs to worry about his own country, and frankly, he can kiss my ass.
Mr. Patel, did you endanger public safety when you said the killer was in custody?
Free wherever you get your news.
What words do you have for Harry Dunn's family today?
Have a nice day.
Do you fear a fourth indictment?
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what? Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
Time to take another look at the Saturday papers. We're joined this morning by Ryan Sabey, Deputy Political Editor of The Sun, and Shona Craven, columnist for The National. So welcome back to both of you. Ryan, you picked out a story on the front of The Telegraph, and we kind of touched on this issue in the last hour. It's this big speech that we're building up to this morning from Keir Starmer at the Munich Security Conference. It's due in about an hour and a quarter's time, but The Telegraph delving in a little bit and picking out some of the messages from it.
Yeah, one of the key themes that Keir Starmer's going to be talking about is not having the over-dependence on America, but also talking about Britain and its Brexit years, saying that the Brexit years are over and it can't look inwards. He's claiming that Britain did look inwards during those Brexit years and actually has to sort of go back to a closer integration, closer links with Europe for its own security, and also saying its own prosperity is linked to all that. And this sort of comes, at a time where Sir Keir is under a lot of pressure back at home. So is he sort of pandering to that sort of soft left of his own party. Rachel Reeves made a speech this week saying the biggest prize is close integration with Europe to get growth. Sir Keir Starmer has talked about sort of closer ties with the single market again. So it's just that edge closer steps back to perhaps where closer to where we were 10 years ago. But it is a big speech. There are going to be lots of world leaders at this security conference today. One of the things as well he's talking about is closer links on defence capabilities. So actually bringing in the expertise and the resources of both Britain and Europe to work together to actually build those resources. And anyone paying close attention would have heard Luke Pollard say twice when we were talking to him, the Brexit years are over. So it's obviously the line that the government are putting out now. Jonah, what's your sense of it as to whether or not that goes? Because again, it comes to the policy, doesn't it? Because we've got these elections coming up again, and it's playing into that.
It's a bit of an incoherent line, isn't it? Because we have Brexited, that was a process, and it happened. And so I'm not really sure what they mean by that. I think most people, whether they voted for Brexit or didn't or abstained or whatever, you'd be mad to not agree that we need to be defended and we need to have less reliance on the United States, especially with everything that's been going on, all the talk about Greenland, etc. Nobody could say, well, hold on, I voted for Brexit, so I don't want us to align with our EU neighbours on defence. You'd have to be pretty mad to think that. But then you've got these lines about economic alignment. And again, are we assuming that people were voting rationally when they voted for Brexit? I don't think many of them really were. So I'm not sure it's going to be that controversial
A lot of Brexit voters will say that they thought it through very carefully.
I'm sure they will, but I don't think necessarily any of this policy detail will annoy people. But I actually think the line, the Brexit years are over, will get people's backs up, even though it actually doesn't mean anything.
Well, because the word is back, and it's back in our sort of lexicon that we're using the word Brexit anyway. Is that...
Yeah, it's happened, so there's no point in saying that, but they've obviously decided that's the message.
Well, it'll be very interesting to see what the reaction is once he has made that speech there.
Indeed.
Shona, take us on to the Eye. A story here about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and police looking into some of the allegations against him. We should stress their allegations at this stage.
Yeah, and what this is a former Royal Protection Officer of the then Prince is saying that he has contacted the police offering help with their inquiries. And one of the things that he's alleging is that officers like himself were told not to log certain guests and not to, were not permitted to know their names. And this is obviously very significant because there are clearly very strict protocols about people visiting royal properties. And so the idea that that could have been a request that was made and that was granted and that who knew about this, that's a huge thing, leaving aside the alleged purpose of these visits by these girls, young women. That does seem to be a very significant detail here. And the Thames Valley Police Force is in discussions with the Crown Prosecution Service regarding allegations of misconduct in public office. It is worth noting towards the end of the story, so the person that I'm referring to, the former protection worker, is Paul Page, who himself was convicted of a £3 million property scam in 2009. So that is added towards the end. But one of the quotes here is that there used to be a joke and say that Andrew should have had a revolving door installed in his bedroom because of all these women who were coming and going, but women who apparently their names were not logged.
What's your sense of this, Ryan, and as to what pressure can be applied? I mean, there's already calls for him to give evidence in the US. Nothing can compel him to do so. Do you think this is going to just keep building and building and building?
Yeah, I think so. And one of the key sort of quote in this piece comes from one of the former chief Crown prosecutor up in the northwest, Nazir Afzal. And he says that the police and the Crown Prosecution Service almost have to act really, really quickly in this case, because it looks like they could be seen as maybe not being above the law, but, is there some kind of immunity? So that's why I think, the police and the prosecutors have to be seen to be doing something, or at least being very, very rigorous and very, very thorough when it comes to this. So that's his take. And I think, you know, but I think there's so much material that this investigation could go on for months, even years.
Yeah, and
because there's so many new allegations all the time, we don't have a response from Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor to each of them, but we have to refer back to his previous statements where he's denied wrongdoing. Yeah.
Absolutely right. We are moving on to this story, student loans, something we have covered on mornings for the past couple of weeks. Take us to this latest reporting on this. I think people, when they hear this, are going to be kind of astounded.
Yeah, this is the system set up for the new student loans that came in sort of in the mid-2000s. Now, the tuition fees started off at £1,000 back in 1998. They went up to £3,000. The fond days back, you know, when it was only £1,000. And then in those mid-2000s, it went up, mid-2010s, as it were, it went up to £9,000. But it was the interest that people are paying and the amount that they're paying back is now just got to such, you know, extortionate amounts. There's people, you know, anecdotally we've heard of people, you know, taking out loans for £45,000, paying it off for 10 years. Their bill is now £47,000. It's like, how did this even happen? But Nick Hillman, he was a special advisor to David Willetts, now Lord Willetts, and he's been talking about these, what they call the Plan 2 loans. And he said they were designed in a mad rush.
This covers quite a few years as well, doesn't it? I can't remember how many years it is, but the students from, I think it's over 10 years.
And when they were deciding this, going through austerity, the government were looking for money, and there's sort of a missive from above saying, oh, you can't touch defence spending, you can't touch pensions, and nothing could come out of that pot. So who's going to fund the bills for public services and some of it? Education's going to take the hit. Where do you look? Well, there's an easy target. It's students. And this is the trouble with why the amount has gone so much. And I think this issue has come to the fore in recent years is because MPs who have gone through the system, have been to university, are now in Parliament.
Yeah, and they're
now raising it. They're knocking on the door of the Chancellor and Prime Minister to tell them to do something about it.
We haven't got loads of time, but this is just sort of post-coalition time. Whereabouts are we in this? Because, of course, we had the Lib Dems who joined that coalition saying they were going to scrap tuition fees, and obviously that didn't happen.
Yes, and it is worth remembering. I mean, we don't have tuition fees in Scotland, so I always am sort of struck by the coalition government increasing tuition fees from 3,290 to a maximum of 9,000 per year. What an extraordinary hike. And, you know, in itself, even without adding on this interest. But as Ryan points out, you know, if you make these promises, we're not going to affect, you know, we're not going to hit the pensioners, we're not going to hit defence, who's left? It's the people who you perhaps aren't thinking are going to get out and vote to the same extent that the pensioners would. Of course, the pensioners have children and grandchildren who'll be affected, but it's that way of like what's going to be the least, what's going to cost us the fewest votes.
Extraordinary.
Do you think there could be some kind of climb down on this? Because I think there's a growing sense of anger.
I think there's a couple of things. One, they could sort of, you know, maybe not swing the axe a little, but actually maybe reduce the bill some way. But actually, the interest rate that's actually being charged on top of the 9% is at the higher CPI at 4.2%.
Yeah, it's RPI, which
they should bring it down to
argue about
the other sort of measure. So I think that's something that they could do.
We'll have to wait and see for that.
Appreciate you both. Thanks so much for that.
See you next hour.
Yep, back to the headlines in a couple of minutes' time. We'll be live in Munich at the security conference.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Hello and a very good morning. It's 8 o'clock. This is Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
And I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how we're looking.
Keir Starmer to call for a more European NATO and reduce the alliance's dependence on the United States.
Peter Mandelson asked to testify before Congress about his relationship with the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
We report on the tons of acrid waste dumped next to the M25. The site is still open despite an ongoing investigation by the Environment Agency.
And a little bit later this hour, we'll be looking through the morning's newspapers in our news review with Ryan Saby and Shona Craven.
And finally, a gold for Team GB at the Winter Olympics. Matt Weston slides to victory in the men's singles skeleton. Hello, a very good morning. It's a big day in Munich where world leaders are gathered to discuss global security.
And Sir Keir Starmer is among them, due to speak at around 9 a.m. and will reportedly call on Europe to end its over-reliance on the United States.
A timely message given US Secretary of State Pete Hegseth sent a deputy to a NATO meeting earlier this week, and the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio skipped a key meeting on Ukraine yesterday due to what was being described as a scheduling issue.
So can Sir Keir convince Europe to work together? Here's our political correspondent, Nick Martin.
Well, we're expecting quite a broad-ranging speech from the Prime Minister when he addresses the Munich Security Conference. Yes, it will be about defence, but just seeing the preview to it, it will be more about a repositioning of geopolitics. He will say that Europe needs to stand on its own 2 feet when it comes to defence, that it can't just rely on the might of the United States. Although that's not to say that we expect him to sort of turn their back on the United States. In his speech, we think he will say that the United States is indispensable, but that they can no longer rely on them as a sort of backup power. Now, this has kind of been the tone that we've been hearing from European leaders for some time now, probably more than a year, ever since Donald Trump said, look, you can't expect us to always be coming through with all the support and new munitions and
We're just going to interrupt that report and actually take you live to Munich, where Keir Starmer will make that speech later, because the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is just taken to the podium.
Of a historic alliance, an alliance that saved and changed the world. You know, when this conference began in 1963, it was in a nation, actually it was on a continent, that was divided against itself. The line between communism and freedom ran through the heart of Germany. The first barbed fences of the Berlin Wall had gone up just 2 years prior. And just months before that first conference, before our predecessors first met here in Munich, the Cuban Missile Crisis had brought the world to the brink of nuclear destruction. Even as World War II still burned fresh in the memory of Americans and Europeans alike, we found ourselves staring down the barrel of a new global catastrophe, one with the potential for a new kind of destruction, more apocalyptic and final than anything before in the history of mankind. The time of that first gathering, Soviet communism was on the march. Thousands of years of Western civilization hung in the balance. At that time, victory was far from certain. But we were driven by a common purpose. We were unified not just by what we were fighting against. We were unified by what we were fighting for. And together, Europe and America prevailed. And a continent was rebuilt. Our people prospered. In time, the East and West blocs were reunited. A civilization was once again made whole. That infamous wall that had cleaved this nation into two came down, and with it an evil empire. And the East and West became one again. But the euphoria of this triumph led us to a dangerous delusion that we had entered, quote, the end of history, that every nation would now be a liberal democracy, that the ties formed by trade and by commerce alone would now replace nationhood, that the rules-based global order, an overused term, would now replace the national interest, and that we would now live in a world without borders where everyone became a citizen of the world. This was a foolish idea that ignored both human nature and it ignored the lessons of over 5,000 years of recorded human history. And it has cost us dearly. In this delusion, we embraced a dogmatic vision of free and unfettered trade, even as some nations protected their economies and subsidized their companies to systematically undercut ours, shuttering our plants, resulting in large parts of our societies being deindustrialized, shipping millions of working and middle-class jobs overseas, and handing control of our critical supply chains to both adversaries and rivals. We increasingly outsourced our sovereignty to international institutions while many nations invested in massive welfare states at the cost of maintaining the ability to defend themselves. This, even as other countries have invested in the most rapid military buildup in all of human history and have not hesitated to use hard power to pursue their own interests. To appease a climate cult, we have imposed energy policies on ourselves that are impoverishing our people, even as our competitors exploit oil and coal and natural gas and anything else, not just to power their economies, but to use as leverage against our own. And in a pursuit of a world without borders, we opened our doors to an unprecedented wave of mass migration that threatens the cohesion of our societies, the continuity of our culture, and the future of our people. We made these mistakes together. And now, together, we owe it to our people to face those facts and to move forward to rebuild. Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration, driven by a vision of a future as proud, as sovereign, and as vital as our civilization's past. And while we are prepared, if necessary, to do this alone, it is our preference and it is our hope to do this together with you, our friends here in Europe. For the United States and Europe, we belong together. America was founded 250 years ago, but the roots began here on this continent long before. The men who settled and built the nation of my birth arrived on our shores carrying the memories and the traditions and the Christian faith of their ancestors as a sacred inheritance, an unbreakable link between the old world and the new. We are part of one civilization, Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir. And so this is why we Americans may sometimes come off as a little direct and urgent in our counsel. This is why President Trump demands seriousness and reciprocity from our friends here in Europe. The reason why, my friends, is because we care deeply. We care deeply about your future and ours. And if at times we disagree, our disagreements come from our profound sense of concern about a Europe with which we are connected, not just economically, not just militarily. We are connected spiritually, and we are connected culturally. We want Europe to be strong. We believe that Europe must survive. Because the two great wars of the last century serve for us as history's constant reminder that ultimately our destiny is and will always be intertwined with yours. Because we know that the fate of Europe will never be irrelevant to our own. National security, which this conference is largely about, is not merely a series of technical questions. How much we spend on defense or where, how we deploy it, these are important questions, they are. But they are not the fundamental one. The fundamental question we must answer at the outset is, what exactly are we defending? Because armies do not fight for abstractions. Armies fight for a people. Armies fight for a nation. Armies fight for a way of life. And that is what we are defending. A great civilization that has every reason to be proud of its history, confident of its future, and aims to always be the master of its own economic and political destiny. It was here, in Europe, where the ideas that planted the seeds of liberty that changed the world were born. It was here, in Europe, which gave the world the rule of law, the universities, and the scientific revolution. It was this continent that produced the genius of Mozart and Beethoven, of Dante and Shakespeare, of Michelangelo and Da Vinci, of the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. And this is the place where the vaulted ceilings of the Sistine Chapel and the towering spires of the great cathedral in Cologne, they testify not just to the greatness of our past or to a faith in God that inspired these marvels. They foreshadow the wonders that await us in our future. But only if we are unapologetic in our heritage and proud of this common inheritance can we together begin the work of envisioning and shaping our economic and our political future. Deindustrialization was not inevitable. It was a conscious policy choice, a decades-long economic undertaking that stripped our nations of their wealth, of their productive capacity, and of their independence. And the loss of our supply chain sovereignty was not a function of a prosperous and healthy system of global trade. It was foolish. It was a foolish but voluntary transformation of our economy that left us dependent on others for our needs and dangerously vulnerable to crisis. Mass migration isn't some fringe concern of little consequence. It was and continues to be a crisis which is transforming and destabilizing societies all across the West. Together, we can reindustrialize our economies and rebuild our capacity to defend our people. But the work of this new alliance should not be focused just on military cooperation and reclaiming the industries of the past. It should also be focused on together advancing our mutual interests in new frontiers, unshackling our ingenuity, our creativity, and the dynamic spirit to build a new Western century. Commercial space travel and cutting-edge artificial intelligence, industrial automation and flex manufacturing, creating a Western supply chain for critical minerals not vulnerable to extortion from other powers, and a unified effort to compete for market share in the economies of the global South. Together, we can not only take back control of our own industries and supply chains, we can prosper in the areas that will define the 21st century. But we must also gain control of our national borders. Controlling who and how many people enter our countries, this is not an expression of xenophobia. It is not hate. It is a fundamental act of national sovereignty. And the failure to do so is not just an abdication of one of our most basic duties owed to our people. It is an urgent threat to the fabric of our societies and the survival of our civilization itself. And finally, we can no longer place the so-called global order above the vital interests of our people and our nations. We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored, and we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. and it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice. In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world, and we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law which they themselves routinely violate. This is the path that President Trump and the United States has embarked upon. It is the path we ask you here in Europe to join us on. It is a path we have walked together before and hope to walk together again. For 5 centuries, before the end of the Second World War, the West had been expanding. Its missionaries, its pilgrims, its soldiers, its explorers pouring out from its shores to cross oceans, settle new continents, build vast empires extending out across the globe. But in 1945, for the first time since the age of Columbus, it was contracting. Europe was in ruins. Half of it lived behind an iron curtain, and the rest looked like it would soon follow. The great Western empires had entered into terminal decline, accelerated by godless communist revolutions and by anti-colonial uprisings that would transform the world and drape the red hammer and sickle across vast swaths of the map in the years to come. Against that backdrop, then as now, many came to believe that the West's age of dominance had come to an end, and that our future was destined to be a faint and feeble echo of our past. But together, our predecessors recognized that decline was a choice, and it was a choice they refused to make. This is what we did together once before, and this is what President Trump and the United States want to do again now, together with you. And this is why we do not want our allies to be weak, because that makes us weaker. We want allies who can defend themselves so that no adversary will ever be tempted to test our collective strength. This is why we do not want our allies to be shackled by guilt and shame. We want allies who are proud of their culture and of their heritage, who understand that we are heirs to the same great and noble civilization, and who together with us are willing and able to defend it. And this is why we do not want allies to rationalize the broken status quo rather than reckon with what is necessary to fix it. For we in America have no interest in being polite and orderly caretakers of the West's managed decline. We do not seek to separate, but to revitalize an old friendship and renew the greatest civilization in human history. What we want is a reinvigorated alliance that recognizes that what has ailed our societies is not just a set of bad policies, but a malaise of hopelessness and complacency. An alliance is the alliance that we want is one that is not paralyzed into inaction by fear. Fear of climate change, fear of war, fear of technology. Instead, we want an alliance that boldly races into the future. And the only fear we have is the fear of the shame of not leaving our nations prouder, stronger, and wealthier for our children. An alliance ready to defend our people, to safeguard our interests, and to preserve the freedom of action that allows us to shape our own destiny. Not one that exists to operate a global welfare state and atone for the purported sins of past generations. An alliance that does not allow its power to be outsourced, constrained, or subordinated to systems beyond its control. One that does not depend on others for the critical necessities of its national life. And one that does not maintain the polite pretense that our way of life is just one among many, and that asks for permission before it acts. And above all, an alliance based on the recognition that we, the West, have inherited together. What we have inherited together is something that is unique and distinctive and irreplaceable, because this, after all, is the very foundation of the transatlantic bond. Acting together in this way, we will not just help recover a sane foreign policy, it will restore to us a clear sense of ourselves. It will restore a place in the world. And in so doing, it will rebuke and deter the forces of civilizational erasure that today menace both America and Europe alike. So in a time of headlines heralding the end of the transatlantic era, let it be known and clear to all that this is neither our goal nor our wish. Because for us Americans, our home may be in the Western Hemisphere, but we will always be a child of Europe. Our story began with an Italian explorer whose adventure into the great unknown to discover a new world brought Christianity to the Americas and became the legend that defined the imagination of our pioneer nation. Our first colonies were built by English settlers, to whom we owe not just the language we speak, but the whole of our political and legal system. Our frontiers were shaped by Scots-Irish, that proud, hardy clan from the hills of Ulster that gave us Davy Crockett and Mark Twain and Teddy Roosevelt and Neil Armstrong. Our great Midwestern heartland was built by German farmers and craftsmen who transformed empty plains into a global agricultural powerhouse. And by the way, dramatically upgraded the quality of American beer. Our expansion into the interior followed the footsteps of French fur traders and explorers whose names, by the way, still adorn the street signs and town names all across the Mississippi Valley. Our horses, our ranches, our rodeos, the entire romance of the cowboy archetype that became synonymous with the American West. These were born in Spain. And our largest and most iconic city was named New Amsterdam before it was named New York. And you know that in the year that my country was founded, Lorenzo and Catalina Giraldi lived in Casal Monferrato in the Kingdom of Piedmont, Sardinia. And Jose and Manuela Reina lived in Sevilla, Spain. I don't know what, if anything, they knew about the 13 colonies which had gained their independence from the British Empire. But here's what I'm certain of. They could have never imagined that 250 years later, one of their direct descendants would be back here today on this continent as the chief diplomat of that infant nation. And yet here I am, reminded by my own story that both our histories and our fates will always be linked. Together, we rebuilt a shattered continent in the wake of 2 devastating world wars. When we found ourselves divided once again by the Iron Curtain, the Free West linked arms with the courageous dissidents struggling against tyranny in the East to defeat Soviet communism. We have fought against each other, then reconciled, then fought, then reconciled again. And we have bled and died side by side on battlefields from Kapyong to Kandahar. And I'm here today to leave it clear that America is charting the path for a new century of prosperity, and that once again, we want to do it together with you, our cherished allies and our oldest friends. We want to do it together with you, with a Europe that is proud of its heritage and of its history, with a Europe that has the spirit of creation and liberty that sent ships out into uncharted seas and birthed our civilization, with a Europe that has the means to defend itself and the will to survive. We should be proud of what we achieved together in the last century, but now we must confront and embrace the opportunities of a new one. Because yesterday is over. The future is inevitable. And our destiny together awaits. Thank you.
So the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, there speaking to that audience at the Munich Security Conference, laying out a message of working together with Europe in the future. He talked about the aftermath of the Second World War. He's talked about a dangerous delusion where people believe that the rules-based global order would replace national interests. He said that was foolish. He laid out various reasons why he thought that was the case. And he said that under Donald Trump, the US would take on the task of restoration. He said that they were prepared to do that alone if necessary, but their preference was to do it together with Europe. And he said, we belong together, which got a bit of a round of applause there. He also talked about how the United States cared deeply about Europe's future. He said, we believe Europe must survive because our destiny is intertwined with yours. But he did have various criticisms, didn't he? He talked about they didn't need to abandon global institutions, but he did talk about the need to reform, and he singled out the UN, for example, as far as that was concerned. But there was a real message, wasn't there, that he didn't want allies to be weak. The United States didn't want their allies to be weak because that would make us weaker, he said. And he said acting together with Europe will help restore a sane foreign policy.
Yeah, I think that was the sort of the main headline of the speech, this idea that the United States doesn't want to withdraw from Europe. But I think the subtext to all of this is that as long as Europe continues in the way that the United States wants it to, and that speech was peppered with words like our heritage, Christian faith, Christian civilization. He called for a Europe that's proud of its ancestry, proud of its heritage. I wonder what that will do to people in Europe and the United States who aren't of European heritage. There's a sense of othering in this speech. We're going to go back, actually, though, to Marco Rubio, who's now taking questions on anything that will come up. Let's listen.
The last 24 hours have voiced their impression that the Russians, let me put it colloquially, the Russians are playing for time. They're not really interested in a meaningful settlement. There is no indication that they're willing to compromise on any of their maximalist objectives. Offer to us, if you could, your assessment of where we are and where you think we can go.
Well, I think where we are at this point is that the issues at play that have to be, here's the good news. The good news is that the issues that need to be confronted to end this war have been narrowed. That's the good news. The bad news is they've been narrowed to the hardest questions to answer, and work remains to be done in that front. I hear your point about, well, the answer is we don't know. We don't know if the Russians are serious about ending the war. They say they are, and under what terms they were willing to do it, and whether we can find terms that are acceptable to Ukraine upon that Russia will always agree to. But we're going to continue to test it. In the meantime, everything else continues to happen. The United States has imposed additional sanctions on Russia's oil. In our conversations with India, we've gotten their commitment to stop buying additional Russian oil. Europe has taken its set of steps moving forward. The Pearl program continues, in which American weaponry is being sold for the Ukrainian war effort. So all these things continue. Nothing has stopped in the interim. So there's no buying of time here in that regard. What we can't answer, but we're going to continue to test, is whether there is an outcome that Ukraine can live with and that Russia will accept. And I would say it's been elusive up to this point. We've made progress in the sense that for the first time, I think, in years, at least at the technical level, there were military officials from both sides that met together last week, and there'll be meetings again on Tuesday, although it may not be the same group of people. Look, we're going to continue to do everything we can to play this role of bringing this war to the end. I don't think anybody in this room would be against a negotiated settlement to this war so long as the conditions are just and sustainable. And that's what we aim to achieve, and we're going to continue to try to achieve it, even as all these other things continue to happen on the sanctions front and so forth.
Thank you very much. I'm sure if we had more time, there would be many questions on Ukraine. But let me conclude by asking a question about something entirely different. The next speaker here in just a couple of minutes will be the Foreign Minister of China. When you served in the Senate, sir, people considered you a kind of a China hawk.
So did they.
So did they.
Yeah.
We know that there will be, in about 2 months' time, a summit meeting between President Trump and President Xi Jinping. Give us your expectation. Are you optimistic? Can there be a quote-unquote deal with China? What do you expect?
Well, I would say this. The two largest economies in the world, two of the big powers on the planet, we have an obligation to communicate with them and talk, and so do many of you on a bilateral basis as well. I mean, it would be geopolitical malpractice to not be in conversations with China. I would say this, because we're two large countries with huge global interests, our national interests will often not align. Their national interest and ours will not align, and we owe it to the world to try to manage those as best we can, obviously avoiding conflict, both economic and worse. And so it's important for us to have communications with them in that regard. On areas in which our interests are aligned, I think we can work together to make positive impact on the world, and we seek opportunities to do that with them. But we have to have a relationship with China, and many of the countries represented here today are going to have a relationship with China, always understanding that nothing that we agree to could come at the expense of our national interest. And frankly, we expect China to act in their national interest, as we expect every nation state to act in their national interest. And the goal of diplomacy is to try to navigate those times in which our national interests come into conflict with one another, always hoping to do it peacefully. I think we also have a special obligation, because whatever happens between the U.S. and China on trade has a global implication. So there are long-term challenges that we face that we're going to have to confront, that are going to be irritants in our relationship with China. That's not just true for the United States, that's true for the broader West. But I do think we need to try to manage those the best we can to avoid, unnecessary friction if it's possible. But no one is under any illusions. There are some fundamental challenges between our countries and between the West and China that will continue for the foreseeable future for a variety of reasons. And it's some of the things we hope to work together with you on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. We've run out of time. I'm sorry that I can't take questions from all those who wanted to ask questions. Mr. Secretary of State, thank you for this message of reassurance. I think this is much appreciated here in the hall. Let's offer a round of applause.
That was Marco Rubio. We're taking a few questions from the chair of the Munich Security Conference, Wolfgang Ischinger, saying that, quite importantly, actually, when it comes to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Rubio claiming that they don't know if the Russians are serious about ending the war in Ukraine. Of course, Russia has continued to bomb while Ukraine has said that it is willing to accept a ceasefire if one is on offer. The Ukrainians, of course, wanting to come to some kind of agreement that would end Russia's invasion. Just to go back to what we were saying about his speech as well, I think that is going to go down as quite a seismic speech made by the US Secretary of State. Last year, we had J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, excoriating Europe for what he saw as stepping away from Western values. Marco Rubio doubling down on that idea that the United States will be with Europe as long as Europe continues to maintain what he says are these Western values, this idea of Western civilization, talking about mass migration being a crisis, destabilising societies, saying that's not an expression of xenophobia. He said it's just the truth. He talks about the centuries of expansion as European nations settled and built empires, and of course on the other side of that is those countries all around the world that were colonised by European nations. So it was a speech that wanted the United States and Europe to be tied closer together, but there was, through the heart of it, a lot of talk about our Western civilization and Christian faith. And of course, there are many people in Europe and the United States who are not of European heritage who will hear words like that from Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, and be concerned that they are being othered, separated from whatever future the US wants with Europe going forward.
Yeah, and we're going to get a reaction to it shortly, actually. We're going to talk to Jens Stoltenberg, who I'm pretty sure I spotted in the audience there. He's in Munich. We're going to talk to him in a few minutes, actually. He's the incoming chair of the Munich Security Conference and used to be head of NATO for about 10 years, ending in 2024. So really interesting to get his take on what Marco Rubio's message was there.
Absolutely will. All right, now, James has joined us. Just going to see if they were going to switch the camera over to see you here with us. For a look back at some of the sport we saw yesterday and a look ahead as well to what we've got coming.
I'm glad you said that and not on Marco Rubio's speech.
We're going to get you on that one, James.
Which was fascinating. I have to say, we were all watching behind the scenes.
It was
fascinating to see, and I think the underlying thing, as long as it brings peace, everybody will be happy.
There you go.
But sport-wise, look, lots of rivalries going on in sport. Might be rivalries all over the world in terms politically and in war, but there's rivalries going on in sport, none more so than at the Winter Olympics right now. And good news for Team GB, we have a medal.
Yeah.
And it's a good one. It's the best one of all. First medal of the Winter Olympics in Milan Cortina, and it's Matt Weston winning gold in the men's skeleton. Now, Weston has led the competition from the start, breaking the track record twice in Thursday's first 2 heats, and again in the penultimate heat on Friday night. The victory is Britain's first gold medal for an individual male event since Robin Cousins in figure skating in 1980. And Matt Weston, though, remains the UK's most decorated slider at World Championship level and now holds the title of Olympic champion. Yeah, that was the reaction of his family last night when Matt won that gold medal, and he gave his reaction following his historic victory.
In the last corner, it's not too crazy, so I was just like holding on, thinking, oh, I hope I've done enough, I hope I've done enough. And then I came up in the outrun. I didn't even see the time, I just saw green, and I didn't just started crying straight away. I almost didn't break. The emotions just hit me like a flood. And next thing I know, Martin Stukas is basically jumping on my back in the outrun, saying some amazing things to me and saying that how proud he was of me, which means a lot coming from someone who's like so great in the sport.
Now let's take a look at the rest of the day's sport headlines.
There's a reason why I've got a Premiership medal.
There was a lot of noise around Alan possibly going to Manchester United and then Newcastle.
If you're asking me would I like Alan Shearer here, of course, who wouldn't like Alan Shearer?
Doesn't bother me at all it is talk.
There are only 2 clubs that are interested in Alan.
I spoke to Sir Alex Ferguson. The temptation to go to Man United was huge.
You name your price, you've got to be prepared to stick to it.
How much is it? Because that was a world record.
It's £15 million, making it virtually impossible for me to leave.
I think there was an inevitability that he would move at some stage.
For United! I will, lads!
We're breaking records. We're giving people hope again.
Be like 725 for his name and number.
I just had to come back home. It was my dream to play for Newcastle and score goals at the Gallagher.
A lot of people probably looked at us and thought we probably needed a couple of centre-halves. Not Keegan.
After all, I'm only a sheet metal worker's son from Newcastle.
If I had to make the same decision again, it would be signed for Newcastle all day long.
Blackburn Rovers are finally back in the big time. Jack Walker's millions and the managerial expertise of Kenny Dalglish are proving a potent combination at Ewood Park these days.
I knew what was happening up there at Blackburn. They were continually spending money. We was building to be successful. Jack Walker just had one idea, which was, this is my hometown club. I'm not interested in too much on the commercial side. I just want them to be a success.
Shearer, he scored on his debut! Alan Shearer, Britain's most expensive footballer, starts to repay the fee with that cracking volley.
Made it hard for myself, haven't I? People are going to expect great things off me now.
Being the most expensive footballer in the Premier League, how important was it for you within your own mind to get off to a good start and start banging in a few goals?
Blackburn Rovers and Southampton Football Club have put that price tag on me. People keep saying to me I'm the most expensive, all right, I am, but I've got nothing to do with that price tag. I can only go out and play to the best of my ability, and if clubs want to pay that amount of money for me, then so be it.
It was Kenny and Ray, obviously, who had decided that they would like to buy him. Ray had him with the England under-21s. He knew what talent was there. And it was at their instigation, really.
The atmosphere completely changed. We'd started signing more expensive players, and it were just little old Blackburn that were doing it. As the weeks went on, more and more arrived. We were getting the most expensive man in football, and Jack Walker brought him to us.
What an effort and what a goal from Alan Shearer! Oh, what a story!
He was sort of the old-fashioned centre-forward, really. He'd head the ball, he'd use his elbows, he'd shoot, he'd run into space behind the back four for fun. It was just everything that you would want.
Alan will tell you himself, he's the worst trainer in pre-season. Always at the back when they're running. We thought, what have they signed here? This kid can't move. All of a sudden, we got the balls out and no one could catch him.
Alan Shearer scores for Blackburn Rovers.
I had 4 incredible years at Blackburn. I mean, they were just amazing. From that very first meeting that I had with Kenny, Ray Harford, Robert Corr and Jack Walker, it's so clear to me, I can still remember it now. They said to me, we want to win the Premier League and we think we can do it within 4 years.
When he first come there, he was running into them channels, he was bullying centre-backs, scored different types of goals, long range, free kicks, headers. He was just an incredible player, and in the dressing room he was fantastic.
Still in play, and Shearer's in there, it's a goal! Alan Shearer's done it for Blackburn Rovers! Well, he's come for Alan Shearer, goal for Blackburn Rovers! Blackburn Rovers are the champions!
Little old Blackburn to come into the Premier League and take on the might of Man United and beat them to the Premier League was something that was so special.
I can't speak highly enough of him. He's a reason why I've got a Premiership medal.
Whatever anybody says, it's a team game. He was the most important player. His goals were phenomenal. He didn't miss. He's absolutely ruthless, and you know, when any sort of opportunity arose, you knew it was going to hit the back of the net.
We had a talisman up front, didn't we? I mean, everybody knew that. Kenny and Ray developed a system to help play to that.
I always knew that Alan wanted to be that out-and-out number 9, but I was fine with that in terms of the way that I played at Norwich. I was always a sort of focal point as a striker, and always played better with somebody making runs off me.
Chris knew what I wanted, I knew what he wanted, and we understood each other's game really, really well. He played a huge part in our success, and it was just that the best partnerships are the ones you don't have to work at. Me and Chris just clicked straight away.
He'd won the Premier League with Blackburn, and in respect to Blackburn, they...
James, thanks very much indeed. We're going to check on the weather now.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Well, there'll be some wintry hazards this weekend, but today will bring plenty of sunshine at last before more wet weather moves in. There's a widespread frost now, locally sharp, with icy stretches bringing some difficult travel conditions on untreated surfaces. There'll be almost unbroken morning sunshine. Oh, how nice. But Ireland will see cloud increasing. Most places look dry, but exposed coasts will have a few wintry showers. And northern Scotland and eastern England look most at risk there.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
Right, let's take another look at the morning's papers. We're joined by Ryan Saby and Shona Craven. Guys, morning again to you. Thank you so much for sticking around. Let's take this story here that I think you picked out in the Mail. This is, in fact, we are waiting for the Prime Minister to speak at the Munich Security Conference, aren't we? And we've got an idea of what he might have to say. Take us through this reporting here.
Yeah, there's a few key themes and key issues that the Prime Minister wants to raise when he's in Munich at the Security Summit. And one of the things is that there cannot be this over-dependence on America, that Britain now in this sort of changing position of America and the sort of unreliability of Donald Trump, they actually have to move towards more interdependence towards Europe. And I think one of the things that the Prime Minister and France and Germany are looking towards is what Donald Trump said about Greenland. It's, potentially trying to acquire a country that is part of NATO, or at least part of Denmark. And I think they just cannot rely on America. Now, it's interesting to hear Marco Rubio talking about how Europe and America will always be entwined. Now, it's quite easy. It's a sheer contrast to what J.D. Vance said last year when he attacked Europe over immigration and free speech. But I think there is just that underlying issue that Keir Starmer just knows that that Europe has to be, at the centre for Britain in terms of defence, security, and even he'll go on to talk about prosperity as well.
Yeah, and also, that message does tie in with what Donald Trump has talked about, how Europe does need to step up and spend more on defence, and that's part of the message, isn't it? And he's suggesting doing it in cooperation with Europe, perhaps to save a bit of money because they can do joint procurement and joint purchasing. And what did you make of what Starmer is saying, especially having listened to Marco Rubio and his message?
Yeah, well, we're expecting to hear some quite diplomatic language from the Prime Minister saying that the US's national security position is evolving. Erratic might be another word, or completely unpredictable and terrifying could be another. But yeah, I think that is going to be emphasised diplomatically, but you've also got this line about, you know, dangerous times, and them saying we're not the Britain of the Brexit years anymore, because we know that in dangerous times we would not take control by turning inward, we would surrender it. I won't let that happen. But I mean, when we voted on Brexit, obviously you would hope people would imagine that there could be dangerous times ahead and kind of factor that into trying to take a more isolationist approach. But here we are now.
Just in light of that story and what we heard from Marco Rubio while you guys were listening in, there was this idea of Europe and the US being intertwined, but what did you make of sort of it being peppered with this idea of our civilization, this Western civilization, this Christian culture? That's speaking to a very specific audience, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there was a reference to the godless communist threats and things. Perhaps doesn't feel like a speech for today.
Yeah, it shows like they are very. The Americans, when they come, you know, when JD Vance came over last year, it's a security conference, but they are willing to go well and above and beyond the sort of key themes of the summit, actually. And is it something that European nations will want to get behind, or do you think that there will be any commentary about it? Because it seems as if we've got your back as long as you behave in the way that we do.
Well, exactly, and you can talk a lot about history and you can talk a lot about tradition and shared values, but I think when we can see for ourselves the values that are being demonstrated by the US in the US, let alone globally, I don't know that the warm words, certainly much warmer than last year, but I don't know how much store people will put in that.
It's a bit of a handbrake time. We're
going to
talk about fat jabs next.
Or weight loss jabs.
Weight loss jabs. You hate that term.
I hate fat jabs.
Don't you?
I do. I hate it.
Fair enough. It's quick to say, but it's not when you then have a big discussion about it, I guess. But let's move to the Times. I think a few of the papers picked this up, haven't they? The idea that you can nip out and have your weight loss jab in your lunch break.
Yeah, it's quite an odd way.
Maybe instead of having lunch.
Well, exactly. It's quite an odd way to put it, isn't it? Making it seem like a very casual thing to do, when what Boots are sort of emphasising is a human connection rather than ordering these injections online. You go and speak to someone, you might feel reassured by that. But the Times piece, quite rightly points out concerns that people are lying about their weight or submitting, falsified pictures and things, because of course you have to meet criteria and you have to be over a certain weight for this to be appropriate to be prescribed. So I'll be really interested to see if there is a big take-up. I don't know how the prices compare with the online providers, but I've read things about people turning up with, lead-lined pockets and things like that to step on the scales and qualify. So I wonder if they'll really be assuring, that not in the UK, obviously, because this hasn't been available, but I'd be interested to see, given that there's already 1.9 million people using these jabs, that was by the end of last year, how many more people are in the market? I mean, to me, it's quite a major step to take. And we all, I think, know probably in our own lives of people who are maybe taking these jabs and then perhaps aren't obese or aren't anymore, but are using it for sort of maintenance purposes. So, yeah, I'd be really interested to see how this takes off.
Yeah, and of course, for the government, that I'm presumably quite pro this idea because it could take pressure off the NHS. There are sort of so many conditions linked to obesity, and if it can tackle that, then the hope is that that will not only be good for people's health, but also the health of the NHS. Yeah, absolutely. We covered some this subject in the week, actually. And if you do take these weight loss jabs and you do some moderate exercise, I think it's about 5,000 steps a day, you do keep the weight off, and it can actually save the NHS about £17 billion. So there are big savings. So you can see why the government are encouraging people to go through the NHS or even go privately if they can actually, it can sort of help the bottom line, really.
OK. And just because I think we've got enough time, and I don't know if my director Emma's going to tell me off, but on the same page as that story about the weight loss jabs, there's a brilliant picture of a couple of tawny owls that fell down a chimney in Surrey. Apparently got soot in their eyes, but I just said, oh, we've got the Times today.
Can you see that?
Turn to that page on page 6. There we go.
I'll hold it up.
The one
Can you see it?
in the light for
I love it.
particularly.
Unplanned sleepover on a chandelier and on a curtain. I mean, that is just brilliant. A couple of tawny owls. How nice.
Unplanned sleepover.
Hilarious. So there you go. Sorry to interject your news with that nonsense, but I thought that was a lovely picture. Right, where are we going to next?
Worth lingering on the owl. OK, we're going to talk about pubs now. This is part of the Telegraph's campaign, isn't it? They've got this push to save our pubs. There have been lots of concerns from the industry about business rates and the rest. So what's this latest
one of the campaign for Real Ale, they are concerned that if you have there'll only be a protection if you are the last pub in the village or town, and they're saying that any other pubs that are standing there in towns and cities could be turned into flats, houses, or takeaways. Now, they say that the Telegraph here, the headline is Labour will let greedy developers close pubs, but I think the government have hit back quite strongly against this, because I think there is an issue. There are lots of pubs closing down. If no one wants to take them on, you probably want something, in its place that, can help the high street at least. But you can kind of see that there are protections where people in, villages and towns can actually club together to take over these pubs. Now, I don't think the government are trying to take that right away, but it wouldn't be great if pubs that have stood there for decades and decades are then turned into houses and takeaways. But it seems like a big campaign issue, and it seems like the pub sector has been hit hard in recent months, as you mentioned about the business rates, Labour MPs being banned from pubs as well. So they kind of have been through it, and it's taken their toll.
Well, as you say, the government have hit back. They say the claims are simply not true. Then go on to explain that they've got this new Pride in Place programme. £5 billion. And I think Keir Starmer tried to announce that this week, but was kind of put off by lots of questions about other things. Right,
I mean, there's separate issues here. You have the issues facing hospitality and pubs closing and the building being left empty, and then you have the issue of the housing crisis that we're facing across the UK. So I do think it's a bit irresponsible to talk about greedy developers, because the actual cost of building and developing is really high, and that's why we have a housing crisis. So if we're going to brand anyone who wants to turn a disused building into housing greedy, then we're going to be at a bit of a standstill. But it sort of sounds like they're going to compulsory purchase a pub halfway through them pulling a pint and shutter it, but I don't think that's quite what's happening.
No, there really would be outrage if that was
there would.
Let's move to the front page of The Sun. Shona, you wanted to talk about Gordon Ramsay appealing to the Beckhams.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this because I find this an extremely cynical move by Gordon Ramsay. You have to read quite far into the story to find on Wednesday his new 6-part Netflix documentary, Being Gordon Ramsay, airs. What a coincidence, then, that he is using a quite sad family disagreement to get publicity for himself. He says that he's acting as a peacemaker. He says he has a good relationship with Brooklyn. I think if we know one thing, it's that Brooklyn Beckham is unhappy with his family and their associates using the media to make claims. And I think he said some pretty mad things. It's hard, isn't it, when you're infatuated? Love is blind. It's easy to get carried up on that roller coaster. Those are not the words of a peacemaker. That's quite a partial position. I feel sorry for Brooklyn. I think this is shameless by Gordon Ramsay.
Hasn't Mr Ramsay got some issues with his own family as well? His daughter and Adam Peter, wasn't there some issues around that wedding? Not to
I'm pleased to say I don't actually follow his family dramas too closely, but...
Go on, Ryan, your paper.
Do you take the same kind of cynical approach, or do you think... I mean, he is friends, I think, isn't he, with Beckham Senior?
He says he's friends with them all, but I don't think he is anymore.
I would say it's a fantastic interview by my colleague, but, Gordon Ramsay's got, when they go on these publicity tours, you can throw in a load of extra questions, and she's managed to get him talking about the Beckhams and the relationship, and he seems to think that time will heal in this case. It's the cliche, but he will come back and he'll back into the arms of his mum and dad's, but time will tell.
Well, we'll have to watch social media and see if that's the case.
Watch it very, very
Probably
carefully.
we'll find out. Ryan, this is a story I spotted, actually, yesterday, which is absolutely fascinating, about how much money social media influencers can make. And it's a huge amount, isn't it?
Yeah, no, just by putting one post onto, you know, if you've got a big following, you've got a few million followings. There's an example here, Molly May Haig, who's a 26-year-old former Love Island contestant. She can actually earn up to £60,000 per sponsored post, which is an absolutely staggering amount. And this kind of feeds into the story that there's 1,000 taxpayers aged under 30, which has gone up by just over 10%. But I think this is where the issue here is that there's so much more being spent on advertising or on social media. I think it's £1 billion that will be this year. So the eyeballs are, you know, on social media. That's where the money is, and people are going to take advantage of it. And even the government, you know, party to this as well. They are paying influencers. You know, it says over £500,000 here, you know, a year just to get their campaigns and get publicity. We've seen it in Downing Street as well, where they invite, you know, as a press conference with the Chancellor not too long ago, they have social media influencers in there asking her questions. They are playing a bigger part
makes sense.
on covering issues.
For some people, some generations, that's where they tend to get their news or their information from different social media platforms.
Yeah, I think some people will be going, oh, that's ridiculous, £60,000, what a waste of money. But we have to remember that back in the day, if you were taking out adverts in a broadsheet newspaper that was targeting your demographic, that would not be cheap. And, you know, the people who follow these influencers, that's a specific market. And if you know you're going to reach them, then obviously it's worth it for the advertisers. The problem, I think, is young people looking at this and thinking, OK, my career plan will be to be an influencer, certainly if they've seen the size of the student loans for people going to university.
Yeah, is there anything wrong with that?
The thing that's wrong with it is that only a limited number of people can ever achieve this reach and this income. There's nothing wrong with dabbling online, I suppose, if you're old enough. But, you know, we need to be realistic about how many people are actually making that money. Other people may be making a small amount of money, possibly at the expense of other things that they could be training or doing and going down that route when it might not be very profitable.
It's interesting how much the ads work, Anna?
How much the
ads work?
They do work. I mean, I'm terrible. I seem to buy something to wear every time I go
closing on social media
Instagram.
because the ads are too good.
Yeah, it's too expensive. I need to give it up.
Indeed. Ryan, Shona, thanks so much for being with us. As always, really good discussion this morning. We'll be back in a couple of minutes' time. We're back in Munich, where the Prime Minister is due to give an address. That's not him.
The best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
They call him the king of the jungle.
Being a Sky News journalist.
Yusra Al-Baghir has this report.
And this is what's left of it.
As a woman of colour, how did the Harris campaign speak to you?
People risk their lives to speak to us for this report.
Mr. Zuma, Sky News.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
Hello and a very good morning. It's 9 o'clock. This is Mornings with Jones and Melbourne. I'm Anna.
And I'm Kamali. Thanks for starting your day with us. Here's how we're looking.
Keir Starmer to call for a more European NATO and reduce the alliance's dependence on the United States.
A message that was echoed by the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who's also keen to remind Europe its destiny remains intertwined with the US.
For the United States and Europe, we belong together. America was founded 250 years ago, but the roots began here on this continent long before.
Peter Mandelson asked to testify before Congress about his relationship with convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein.
Also ahead, we'll look at the crisis in NHS dentistry, which means some people are going almost a decade without a checkup and resorting to DIY surgery.
And finally, a gold for Team GB at the Winter Olympics. Matt Weston slides to victory in the skeleton.
Hello, good morning, and thank you for being with us. It is a big day ahead in Munich, where world leaders are gathered to discuss global security.
So Keir Starmer is amongst them and is due to speak any moment now and will reportedly call on Europe to end its over-reliance on the United States.
It's a timely message, given the US Secretary of Defence Pete Hegseth sent a deputy to a NATO meeting earlier in the week, and the US Secretary of State Marco Rubio skipped a key meeting on Ukraine yesterday due to what he said was a scheduling issue.
Well, in the last hour, Mr Rubio has addressed the conference and struck a conciliatory note, saying the US and Europe belong together, and the US doesn't seek to separate, but to revitalise an old friendship.
Under President Trump, the United States of America will once again take on the task of renewal and restoration, driven by a vision of a future as proud, as sovereign, and as vital as our civilization's past. And while we are prepared, if necessary, to do this alone, it is our preference and it is our hope to do this together with you, our friends here in Europe. For the United States and Europe, we belong together. America was founded 250 years ago, but the roots began here on this continent long before. The men who settled and built the nation of my birth arrived on our shores carrying the memories and the traditions and the Christian faith of their ancestors as a sacred inheritance, an unbreakable link between the old world and the new. We are part of one civilization, Western civilization. We are bound to one another by the deepest bonds that nations could share, forged by centuries of shared history, Christian faith, culture, heritage, language, ancestry, and the sacrifices our forefathers made together for the common civilization to which we have fallen heir. And so this is why we Americans may sometimes come off as a little direct and urgent.
Well, you saw him there in the audience listening to Marco Rubio. We can speak now live to former NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg. A very good morning to you, and thanks so much for talking to us. I want to start by asking you about Marco Rubio's speech and what you made of it, talking there about America's desire for cooperation with Europe. He said we belong together. Given the fact that there seemed to have been concerns that the US was pulling away from Europe, will that message come as some relief?
Yes, the speech was an invitation for Europe to work together with the United States and North America to strengthen the transatlantic bond. And that is, of course, a message that is welcomed across Europe. Then the speech also recognized, and I agree also on that there are differences on trade, on climate, and also on other issues. But the best way of addressing these differences is to sit together and discuss and find a common ground.
Mr Stoltenberg, Kamal here, good morning to you and thank you for joining us. That was sort of the broad theme of the speech, but there was also, peppered within the speech, this reference to Western civilization, our culture, our civilization, Christian heritage. What did you make of that sort of ethno-nationalist tone that Marco Rubio decided to strike in this speech? How will that be received?
Well, that's a kind of well-known message from the Trump administration, and of course many European countries view those challenges in a different way. But again, we have a lot in common. We need to find the common ground, and I think that we can live with differences. NATO is an alliance of 32 different democratic nations with different history, different political parties in government. But despite the differences, we have a lot in common, and we have over decades been able to stand together in NATO and protect and defend each other. And that's what really matters in the transatlantic bond.
And you say that you welcome the calls for cooperation, but to what extent do you consider the US now a reliable partner, given what we heard in the last few months about Donald Trump's desire to take over Greenland, for example?
No, of course, there are also reasons for concern, and it is unacceptable to claim the territory of another country, and in particular the territory of an allied country. Greenland is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, and European countries, Norway among them, have been very clear that that cannot be violated, borders cannot be violated. So yes, there are some serious difficulties. But we have also a lot in common, and therefore we need to strengthen what we have in common and find ways to deal with the differences. On Greenland, I welcome that there are now talks between Copenhagen, Greenland and Washington on how to find a way to address those issues that doesn't create any conflict and problems for the whole alliance.
Mr. Stoltenberg, I appreciate you sort of equivocating on this. It's a consummate diplomatic role, but surely there comes a point where there are some things that this ally that you have in the United States, in this Trump administration, does things that you just can't agree with. Are you just saying we have to overlook that stuff for the greater good?
No, we should not overlook it, and therefore I welcome that the United Kingdom, Norway and almost all other European countries have been very clear, stating that it is unacceptable to claim the territory of the country, Denmark, Greenland. And of course, many allies have also been very critical towards the tariffs that has been imposed. So I think we need to be honest about the differences and the disagreements, and some of them are serious. But our challenge is not to admire the problem, it is to actually look for a way to solve them. And NATO has been able to overcome many crises in the past, from the Suez crisis in '56 to when France left the military part of NATO in the '60s, Vietnam War, Iraq War. And therefore we need to look for ways to overcome also the current disagreements. And this speech was at least an invitation to do that, but at the same time recognizing that there are serious matters that has to be addressed.
I want to ask you about the British Prime Minister's Keir Starmer's speech he's about to make. We're expecting him to talk about how Europe should give up its over-dependence on the US, and he's talking about Britain perhaps doing deals on defence with Europe in an increasing, stepping that up. What do you make of that message?
Well, I welcome that, and I think it's a very important message from Prime Minister Starmer, and that is that we need to, Europeans have to take more responsibility for our own defence. And the good thing with that is that it will also increase the likelihood that the US will stay committed to NATO. So by investing more in European defence capabilities, we make Europe stronger, but we also increase the US, the likelihood of the US staying committed to the alliance, because we need to realize that over decades it has been an unfair burden sharing within NATO. This is now changing because the United Kingdom and almost all of the European allies are now stepping up, investing more in defence, and that's the right thing to do.
Stoltenberg, finally then, I guess, your successor, Mark Rutte, called President Trump daddy. What did you make of that when he described him in that way?
Well, as a former Secretary General of NATO, I will not comment on all the statements from the current. He is in charge. I think that Mark Rutte is doing an excellent job as Secretary General of NATO. What I did when I was Secretary General was, of course, to recognize that the message from the United States on increased defense spending had an impact, and that was the language I used, and it's for Mark Rutte to decide on his language.
The serious point, though, is that in your book you talk about using flattery to try and make sure that Trump stays on side, and you just mentioned it there, that you got, you know, the increase in defence spending. How was it working with President Trump during your tenure?
Well, as I describe in my book, I actually were very careful choosing the language and the words. And I decided, and I used that line again and again, that the clear message from President Trump on defense spending is having an impact. I think that's a statement which is correct, it's true, but it also recognized that the message from the United States have had an impact. But I was not willing to go further, because I think it is important to find that balance and also to be clear where we disagree. I discussed with President Trump back then Greenland, because that was the first time he raised the issue of buying Greenland. We discussed tariffs, and of course on those issues we had disagreements, and then we need to also be clear on the issues where we do not look eye to eye.
Well, we really appreciate your time. If you're nipping out of the hall, you probably want to nip back in to see Keir Starmer's speech at Jens Stoltenberg, but we do really appreciate your time and really interesting to get your thoughts today.
Thank you, Mr. Stoltenberg. Appreciate you being with us.
Yeah, and we should be hearing from Keir Starmer. He was due up at 9, but Marco Rubio was a bit late.
I'm keeping an eye on the monitors, yes. Marco Rubio was late, and so Keir Starmer. Oh, Ursula von der Leyen, it looks like, is up at the moment. I don't think we're going to listen in to Ms von der Leyen, as Anna says, will be there.
We'll listen across, though, if there's anything important that comes out of that, yeah. But we're going to turn now to the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, and Peter Mandelson has been urged to answer questions as part of a US Congress investigation into the convicted paedophile.
Yeah, 2 members on the Congressional Oversight Committee, both Democrats, have written to the former ambassador requesting he appear before them. Our US correspondent David Blevins has more.
Lord Mandelson is not compelled to come here to Washington and answer questions. He would have to do so of his own volition. Congressional subpoenas are only legally enforceable when they apply to American citizens. And this is not a subpoena yet. It's just a letter from 2 Democratic members of the committee investigating Epstein, asking Lord Mandelson to come here and answer their questions. They talk about the number of references to and images of him in the Epstein files. Now, Peter Mandelson has questioned the authenticity of the documents, says he has no record or recollection of receiving sums of money from Epstein, and that he regrets ever having a friendship with him. But given that what's been revealed so far has cost him his job as UK ambassador to the United States, has cost him his seat in the Lords, and has cost him his membership of the Labour Party, you've got to wonder how long he can avoid these questions, and indeed how long Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly Prince Andrew, can avoid these questions, because there is no acknowledgement of royal protocol on this side of the Atlantic. One member of Congress says this could bring down the monarchy. And if you think it's impossible that a former prince would appear on Capitol Hill to answer questions, remember that in 2 weeks' time, a former president, Bill Clinton, will appear before this committee to answer questions, the first former president to do so in nearly 50 years.
Well, David Blevins reporting there now, of course, at the centre of all of this are the young women and girls who were abused by Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, our data and forensics team has been combing through thousands of documents and videos, unearthing details from some of the survivors. And here's one excerpt from one report voiced by an actor, and a warning that this clip does contain some distressing content.
J.E. loved massages. Other women would provide... Women would remove top. I'd have to rub feet, and he have me witness sexual contact. Similar people, women, girls, had professional massage therapists. Other girls around looked like models. Like 100 times he had me in the room when massaged. LA stay. A lot of girls around. One girl freaked out and cried. I gave her a hug. She said, "I don't want to do this. I have a boyfriend." Me and another girl said, "Don't worry about it. Leave or stay out here." JE made me stand in my underwear, took pics to show me I looked fat. Personal trainer, if want to be a model, gotta lose weight. Didn't think so many girls involved until his arrest in 2008. Thought I was the only one. Not in my own experience did I see other girls have encounters with friends of JE. It would not surprise me. Always instructed, never asked, instructed to have encounters with other females. VR, remember her being there. I think she was on a flight here and then I went to Florida. Not sure. She was younger than me. I was aging out. I remember seeing him arrested on TV 07, 08, then hearing he got that house arrest thing. Several lawyers, victims contact told me my name brought up to JE and he said, "Oh, she's grateful for everything I've done for her. She won't talk."
And if you've been affected by that report, you can call 116 123 or email joe@samaritans.org.
Now, mobile dentistry vans are helping fill the gaps in the NHS. A charity set up to run clinics in developing countries is now spending more time working in the UK than it is overseas.
Yeah, the units offer extractions, fillings and preventative treatments, helping patients with serious problems who couldn't access NHS care. Our health correspondent Laura Bondog looks at the impact of years of underinvestment in NHS dentistry.
You point to the loose one, the most loose.
Demand for dentists has never been higher, and gaps in services are difficult to fill. Carl's toothache was so bad, he resorted to DIY dentistry. I took a rim pull off a can of pop and I tried to dig it out with one of them.
You tried to take your own tooth out?
Yeah.
What happened?
I just messed it up and it went in and I had to go see an emergency dentist.
But it hurt that much you wanted to try yourself?
Yeah. In Dewsbury, West Yorkshire, this mobile clinic's run by a charity for those who can't access NHS services.
No premolars and then that one molar that we just took before.
Roy's recovering from alcohol and drug addiction. He last saw a dentist 8 years ago.
At the moment, I've got probably no recognisable teeth at the back at all. The last one broke. That's the one what's broken now, and the top ones they're non-existent. So there's just roots at the top. So at the moment, I've got no real chewing teeth, nothing to chew with.
Volunteers say there's a 4 to 5 year wait for dentists in this area.
If there was more access to care, there'd be less problems that we'd see with patients, and we wouldn't be having to have vans set up multiple days, treating as many patients as we can. And you've seen the amount of people that are outside waiting to be seen. It's one of those things that we need it, and there's definitely a shortage of dentists right now.
Open nice and wide.
The charity Dentaid was set up to help patients overseas, but now spends more time running clinics closer to home. The British Dental Association told us underfunding and failed contracts have fuelled the crisis, with reform and real investment urgently needed. It's thought 13 million people in England alone are unable to access an NHS dentist. Children in the north have poorer oral health, with those from the most deprived communities twice as likely to have tooth decay than children living in affluent areas.
How many teeth do little kids have?
Early intervention's a government priority. At this primary, pupils are brushing up on their dental hygiene.
I did one session in Leeds and a kid had to leave the assembly in the session because of toothache. So it is affecting the learning and the health, the concentration. What you're eating and what you're drinking is just as important as brushing your teeth, OK?
What do you reckon is the biggest thing you learned today?
There's more sugar in things than you think there is, and you have to be careful.
I also didn't really know that some very fizzy drinks have lots and lots of sugar in them, because it's a bit surprising how much there is in there.
It's very easy to forget your teeth, because I forgot to brush my teeth this morning.
Did you?
Yeah.
Are you going to brush them later?
Yes.
A Department of Health spokesperson said they're rolling out extra urgent dental appointments and reforming the dental contract to prioritise patients with the greatest need.
Yellow, green, red.
But many want bolder action to stop the decline and decay of NHS dentistry. Laura Bundock, Sky News in West Yorkshire.
All right, stay with us, because after the break, we're going to look at a new study that hopes to revolutionise treatment for people suffering from mental health conditions.